Hello. Let's see, Ruben, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Hi, hi, Ruben. Yes, good. Let's see. We're waiting on Dr. Cap. CryptoGuard said he'll join shortly, so we'll wait just a minute.
I always thought like, oh, don't we have like four teams? And I realized, oh no, it's basic swap and particle. So
Oh, right. Yep, they have multiple teams. Let me see here. Oh, I see Dr. Cap. So let me invite him here. Give me a second.
hey Cap.
Hey,
Oh man, you're all right. Four teams. Good to hear. Bleh, bleh. Let me get my brain blur out of my blur. Hang on a sec.
okay,
Cool. How's it going, by the way?
good. How are you?
Um, bleh probably sums this up. I've been
Oh,
doing
really?
a lot of paperwork today. A lot of mind-numbing paperwork.
Uh,
But this is a good opportunity to unblur.
Yeah, you can shake it off with this.
E-
Yeah,
Exactly.
sounds good. Well, we can start. Yeah, we'll kick it off now. We can start with introductions. I'll go first. I'm Yenachar. I'm associated with the PivX community on the PivX team. And Ruben, maybe introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ruben from the project steward of Firo, formerly known as Zcoin. Guess we're all like, privacy focused projects here, so not much introduction is required. But yeah, check this out.
Right, right. Good point. We're all privacy coins. And Dr. Cap.
I'm Dr. Cap, definitely not Blur. I am an advisor to the Particle Project, which is a privacy-focused ecosystem surrounding e-commerce, as well as Basic Swap Dex, which is an atomic swap-based privacy-focused DEX.
Okay, great. Yep. So we're all here interested in privacy, and that led us to today's main topic, which is tornado cash. I thought maybe we could start by reviewing the tornado cash situation, what it is, and how it's unfolded and gotten us here, and then have that as a lead into how it affects our projects. So I'm glad to make that summary, and you guys can like augment what I say or correct me where I'm wrong. Does that sound like a good way to start?
Yep.
Okay, so
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tornado Cash, it works on Ethereum, which Ethereum is a transparent coin, clear as glass. You can see where all the coins came from and where they go indefinitely into the future, um, which is a privacy problem. We're very much aware of that because that's the motivation behind our coins, the privacy aspect of our coins in any event. And so that was a problem. That was a problem for Ethereum. And a few guys, we see the two Romans. There's a Roman Storm and a Roman Semenov, and they had a partner, Alexei Pertsev. Smart, ambitious, clearly entrepreneurial guys. They came up with the idea for Tornado Cash a few years ago. I think it was like 2019. And the idea with Tornado Cash was if you had some of these coins that were traced indefinitely into the past, you wanted to lose that connection to the past, you could use Tornado Cash to send that into a pool. They use, you had chunked it up into like 0.1, 1, 10 units of Ethereum so that nothing like stood out and could be tied into what was withdrawn. And you put those into a pool, into a privacy pool. When you put them in, you generated like a secret password, like a secret note, I think they called it. And then you could wait some time and withdraw it to a different account and lose that connection. And they did it with a smart contract. Ethereum has smart contracts. So they made a smart contract, which is code that just sits out there on the Ethereum blockchain and runs. And they also made some off-chain software, like the user interface and the website and so forth, that let people go and easily interact with that smart chain to get privacy on their Ethereum. And it was very popular. I'm sure you guys heard about it at the time. It was big news and everybody loved it. It met a need. Even high-profile people, Vitalik Buterin, claimed that he used it. But nonetheless, about a year ago, I think it was last summer, there's a part of the U.S. government called OFAC sanctioned Tornado Cash, and sanctioned by OFAC. OFAC is part of the Department of the Treasury in the U.S. government. And when you're sanctioned by OFAC, everybody who's like affiliated with the OFAC and U.S. law and so forth is supposed to freeze the assets of that individual. It's for a person, it's for a foreign person, importantly, it's not for an American citizen. It's for what they call a foreign person. And when you get sanctioned, they freeze the assets, and then American citizens aren't supposed to, do any business with that person. So this caused an uproar, as I'm sure you remember. I mean, on multiple levels. First of all, why were they? How do you sanction a smart contract, right? It's supposed to be a person, and how can you sanction a smart contract anyway? And what about like human rights? How can you make it so nobody can can use their Ethereum when they haven't even gone through due process of law and so forth and so on? So it had a whole host of problems. Lawsuits were filed. I know Coin Center filed a lawsuit. I think Coinbase was behind a lawsuit and so forth. So, that was really bad. That was last summer. And then it got worse when the U.S. government indicted the two Romans, Roman Storm and Roman Semenov, for crimes, felonies affiliated with money laundering over their actions with Tornado Cash. And, this is, of course, just added insult to injury. It was very off-putting to indict software developers, right, for writing software, and especially something that could be used both for good and for bad. I mean, like everything in the world, right? Okay, so there's the indictment out there, and the indictment, by the way, if any listeners, you can go find it online, and it's very readable. And part of the reason indictments are readable in the U.S., and this is like an important part of the process, you can't be charged with a federal crime just by government guys. You have to go through something called the grand jury process. So they recruit normal guys off the street, and they have to make a case to them, the grand jury, that you should be charged with a crime. And when they do that, they first lay out the case to the grand jury, and then they write up the indictment. And the grand jury has to go along with that indictment. So you got these regular guys off the street reading this document. So they need to make it, understandable. And so you can go look up the indictment on this, and it's actually pretty well written. It has some flaws, which we can get into, but it's well written, and you can get it straight from the horse's mouth. All the things we're talking about here just by reading the indictment. Now, some lawyers have since come out and explained problems with the indictment and so forth. But and the most recent news on the matter, leading into our conversation here, is that one of those lawsuits against the original sanctions, related to the original sanctions of OFAC, the one backed by Coinbase, has since been rejected by a judge. And part of what Coinbase said, they said, how can you sanction Tornado Cash? It's not a person. And they also said, you can't go after the smart contract because that's not property of the people you're upset with. A smart contract isn't property. Those were some of their arguments. And the judge said, Well, and this is very important for all of us. They says it is like a person. A person is like a individual or an entity, and this is an entity. Maybe it's not incorporated, but it's a bunch of people working together for a common cause. It's an entity, so it's a person, and maybe you can buy that. But he also said it's the smart contract is property, just like a vending machine is property. That was the situation used. A vending machine operates on its own automatically, but it's clearly owned by somebody. And I think that's really flawed. But we can get into that. But that was the latest news. The other lawsuit, the one by Coin Center, who are a great bunch of guys, backing us, has not been ruled on yet. So that would be my summary. What you guys have to add or correct on that?
I got questions really. So my understanding is the developers themselves weren't based in the US, but they were extradited. Is that right?
One was a naturalized US citizen, I think Roman Storm, and he was actually charged in the US. I don't think they had to extradite him. I think he was already in the US as a naturalized citizen. The other Roman is on the lam. I don't know if he was in the US or where he resided. I think they generally think he's in Dubai now. At least I read that somewhere. Who knows, right? And the third person, Alexei, he was a resident of the Netherlands, and he was actually arrested in the Netherlands, arrested and kept in jail for like 6 months, which is ridiculous, and he's being charged with money laundering there.
Yeah, actually, he wasn't even charged when they put him into jail. There was no charge against him yet, and I think they only charged him later after he had been sitting a couple of months in jail, right? And I guess that's kind of worrying, given that we, especially in the privacy space, we often talk about oppressive countries, and we talk about these countries as if they're not the typical countries that we think of. Everyone's like, oh, it's China, oh, it's some African nation or some, dictator type of thing. But, as you can see, Netherlands,
it's
supposedly
Netherlands.
one of the, supposedly all free and weed smoking and peace-loving people. It's true, right?
It's right. It sounds like you've been to Amsterdam.
Yeah, throws this guy into jail with no charge and charges him. But to be fair, I mean, the indictment has some good points, and there are things that I feel that could have probably been done better. I think one of the things that was, I think, interesting was because they ran a front end, and of course they tried to add blacklist to the front end, and on top of that they
actually took steps, right? They took steps.
Yes, they did take steps. One of the things that I heard they did was that because the front end preferred their relayers, so a relayer is a kind of like, because with Ethereum, you have to, whenever you do a transaction, you have to, because it's not a privacy chain, someone has to pay for the transaction, right?
Right, gas
and
fees.
Correct. So if you don't have a relayer, what happens is that, you can do all these privacy transactions, but they see the gas fee is being paid by a certain address.
Right.
It kind of defeats the point. Right. So the relayer is kind of like a service where you pay the relayer and the relayer will do that transaction on behalf of you. So obviously the relayer is making a small profit from this because they are charging a little bit above the gas price. So one of the arguments was because the front end preferred the Tornado Cash relayers that they specified, which were probably run by them, they were potentially profiting from this money laundering. I mean, that's the argument, which is an interesting one. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, but I think it's an important distinction, right? Because if they had said like, this front end doesn't prefer any relayer, it just went up, that argument wouldn't even be there. But because there was a preference to channel those things through their through their relayers. That was a strike against them.
That
Apparently, they
makes
also
sense.
and they also tried to raise money for Tornado Cash through PiperSec, as far as I understand, which was also another kind of red flag. And the other thing that kind of like, it's like, oh, they had a governance token, all this type of
Right.
things.
The
So,
torn token.
yes. So the idea is that, like, sure, I'm not against the Tornado Cash developers, but at the same time, they are, I would say, it's not a total like, oh yeah, these guys are totally off the hook. They were just developers. They removed the smart contract admin key. I mean, yes, maybe in essence, but there are certain details of them which make them more culpable than, let's say, people like us, which basically run the protocol. People do transaction. There's no direct benefit for us. We're not a miner. We're not a staker. There's no like additional thing that we're helping to construct the transaction or something like that, right?
Right.
So I guess so there is, I think, some distinction. I think there's also, people have argued that, Americans should be free to use whatever protocol, and protocols, it's like free, right? Because a bad guy can use a protocol, a good guy can use a protocol, right? But when
Yeah.
you are directly facilitating it, whether we agree that this amounts to facilitation or not, I do think that there is some important distinctions there that we have to make versus like a normal privacy coin developer. Yeah.
Right. That's a good distinction. So they were like steering like work towards themselves and profiting, maybe in a like not straightforward way from it, and that's one of the complaints. I can see that. One of the things that I read a legal review of that in the indictment, they claimed they had control over the process. They were coding the front end and so forth and implementing these things, like you say, Ruben. But they point out that there's actually like FinCEN guidance on what makes a money transmitter. So they're charged. One of the indictment charges is like making a money transmitter, and to be a money transmitter, you have to have what they call like absolute independent control over the funds, right?
Yeah. So no,
So
multi-sigs don't count.
uh, say that again.
Multi-sigs don't count because
Oh,
you don't
right.
have full
That's
control.
right.
Yeah.
Multi-sig does not count. And in fact, what the Tornado Cash guys were doing does not count. And it represents actually a confusion. If you read the indictment, they say, okay, when you deposit your funds into a pool, you make this random like password, right? You make this, they call it a secret note when you pass it in. And then you use that secret note to withdraw the funds. If you read the indictment, they say that you send the secret note to the relayers that you mentioned, and it winds up going to the smart contract. And you read that and you think, how in the world could that possibly work? Well, that's of course not how they do it. They actually use the miracle of zero knowledge proofs to demonstrate that they know that secret note. They don't send it to others, so nobody can actually withdraw the funds except the end user. Nobody has control over the funds. I just don't see how that's going to hold up if they stick to that FinCEN guidance where you have to control the funds. If you give me money and I take that money to somebody else and I could run off with it at any time, I'm a money transmitter. And somebody in that role, maybe they need extra regulation. I don't know, but that's the argument. But if I can never run off with the funds, I'm not a money transmitter. The computer maker isn't a money transmitter. The guy giving internet service isn't a money transmitter, nor is the guy making the software you interact with a money transmitter, in my mind.
Yeah, and I think also an important distinction that we also have to make here is that with these type of systems, there isn't really commingling of funds. Although we use the term mixer and pool very kind of like lightly, and people think, oh yeah, it's this pool of funds, everything's being mixed into it. And right now, the way these ZK proofs work is that your funds remain your funds. It's not actually mixed with things. It's just more of like it goes into a black hole,
Right.
but Yeah, you are not mixing your funds with other people, not like coin join or stuff like that, right? So I think that's sometimes people, because of the terminology, which unfortunately doesn't help here. People say, "Oh, you're mixing your funds with illegal." No, no, there's no. You retain control of these funds, which I guess we can talk about the privacy pool proposal that Vitalik raised maybe a bit later. But yeah, I'll let you continue. Stop interrupting.
No, no, no. That we're just maybe. Please mention that proposal. That's where.
Sure. So Vitalik, together with Amin Solani from Spang, well, he's not from Spang Chain anymore, but of Spang Chain fame, and another guy that works with Chainalysis, right, which is already to me a red flag.
Yeah.
He proposed something that on the face of it sounds well intentioned, and I always believe that Vitalik is one of the best actors in the space. Whatever he does, whether it's right or wrong, it usually comes from a place of good intention. And what he was proposing is a kind of like a balance whereby, yes, you have this global anonymity set, this general privacy pool, but if you know that certain transactions or certain coins are like tainted, they came from a hack, that came from this and that, you can choose to say, you can choose to disassociate yourself with those funds. That means like, okay, these dirty funds, I'm not going to touch it. I'll just subscribe to this list. I'm producing a ZK proof that actually proves that I am not one of these people on the blacklist, right? So basically saying that like my funds, whatever the source of my funds is of that did not come from this type of things, which sounds okay, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And obviously, some people got kind of upset because like, the question that we are actually kind of like have to answer first, is that whether, OFAC can actually sanction a smart contract. Should we be creating tools for compliance when the rules themselves kind of are not very clear and kind of are in a state of flux? And that has
Right.
been a constant problem, right? Because if you're trying to kind of build tools for laws that don't really exist yet, but merely kind of like a regulator prefers to do it, from the regulator point of view, and you can't blame them for it, they would want anything that makes their life easy, right? So it's like, yeah, give me a backdoor. Let me see, full transaction history and all of that, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
so so they're going to default to the most privacy invasive thing because it makes their life easier, not necessarily because they're anti-privacy. So we have to understand
Because
nuance,
that's their
and
job. That's what they've
that's their
been hired
job.
to do.
Correct.
Right.
And so, but I guess the question is that, is this kind of jumping the gun to say that, to tell policymakers, hey, look, we have this tool, and because actually the proposal itself isn't that innovative, but because it is Vitalik posting it, right? Because these prominent guys are, like the wizard of the land that is promoting this idea, it is very, because regulators, yes, they're not so dumb, but they also look to people like Vitalik. It's like this is the expert, right? So if he's proposing it, we're gonna take it seriously, right?
Right.
So there's that kind of danger to say that, first of all, should we be even building shit like this, right? And it's noteworthy that Tornado Cash had a tool to actually disclose the full trace of your coins through the system. Like that means you can actually selectively disclose to say, like, as if I didn't use Tornado Cash at all. They have that too. And that's actually that's more privacy invasive than this privacy pools proposal, which is only saying I'm not one of these bad actors or this blacklist type of things. Of course, there's the question of like, who is going to be maintaining this list? Because I think there's a centralization force, like, right? Because like when we, let's say if we all agree to subscribe to this scheme, obviously there'll be just a couple of lists to say, oh yeah, I think this, and this, and this is going to be the default. I'm not going to like bother. So whoever is saying what is right and what is wrong is going to have a lot of power, and you can bet it'll be people like chainalysis that are the ones that are like championing which ones are right and which ones are wrong,
Right, and
and
making money
and
off of it.
yes, that's
Well,
right. So
Ruben,
yeah.
let me ask you one quick thing about that. In this proposal by Vitalik in the Chainalysis guy, does it require
Mhm.
a change to Ethereum, or is this something that, like, is a tool you can just use with Ethereum without modifying Ethereum itself?
There's no modification required. It's
I
just a
see.
matter of how you, yeah, it's just a matter of how you do your Tornado Cash. You have additional ZK proof or something like that. It's not that, it's not rocket science. Yeah,
So
that's
you
right.
could
Yeah.
imagine there being multiple ones of these, right? So anybody is like free to use this tool if they want.
Yes.
But they can. How can they use it without a change? I mean, they would have to change
Because
the way
no,
Tornado Cash worked or something, right? They're going to have to actually
some
change the
tooling at least,
mixing to.
at least some tooling, because you are producing a proof that you are not, that your stuff didn't came from a particular thing. I'm not exactly sure whether the smart contract itself requires it, but in any case, the existing Tornado Cash is actually kind of outdated. There's actually like Tornado Cash Nova is so much better. There's no need for fixed denominations. Asset type is hidden. I mean, there are other systems like Railgun and stuff like that. They already do this
Uh,
already. So I mean, I'm not shilling them, but I'm saying that if we were to talk about this privacy pool proposal, to me, like Tornado Cash in its current incarnation is already there. It doesn't offer good privacy. It's already OFAC sanctioned. But we're talking about like this as a potential way forward for other smart contract privacy mechanisms or privacy coins to potentially include this feature to be able to exclude yourself to prove that you aren't from these particular things. So yeah, yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answered your question.
no, yeah, that's good. I'm curious, Dr. Cap, what do you think of that? Of like a system that lets you exclude a blacklist?
I think there are so many dimensions to this. I think my first question is why would you have the blacklist? Who's on the blacklist? Why are you putting on the blacklist? Is that blacklist going to change? Is someone who's on the blacklist now going to be taken off the blacklist in the future? And again, why? You're always looking at the geopolitical implications of a blacklist, the politics. I emphasize the politics. When I've been listening to you, one of the things I've been thinking about recently, it's funny. So, again, reminder, my background's emergency medicine consultant. Had a nice little social, met up with a colleague of mine who is a psychiatrist. And one of the things we immediately got to talking about, and she'd asked me, was, I was going to give a talk at one conference once related to psychedelics and my own experiences with them, and my own views on therapeutics. And we got into discussion about therapeutic potential, and we were like, it's funny that there was a moratorium on research from the 70s pretty much until late 90s, early 2000s,
That
and
is
even
pretty
now,
crazy.
yeah, exactly. So even though it's been recognized prior to the 70s, there was a lot of potential therapeutic value, and actually, a huge amount of our foundational biochemical understanding of psychiatry was a direct result of studying biochemical changes of people under the influence of LSD and other psychedelics. There was essentially a clear moratorium that was politically driven. Now, that to me says, okay, let's step aside from that and just go straight into, well, people dealing with research to that, people dealing with the supply, distribution, usage of that, these people could be put on a blacklist for their funds usage. And then arbitrarily, due to various other social circumstances and social pressures over time, that may change. But was it the right thing to do morally and ethically is my question. Was putting them on the blacklist in the first place the right thing to do? And who has the authority to put someone on a blacklist for that? And why should they have the authority to do that? So underlying all of this is the concept of blacklists and the ethics and the morality and the pragmatic value and the political implications of blacklists. And I think if you start with blacklists as your primary assumption, then you're immediately on shaky ground. And the reason we're having this discussion is because on a very fundamental level, Ethereum on an L1 is not privacy designed. It's not based on privacy. The privacy comes as a second layer, which is via, mixing, well, we'll call it zero knowledge proof services like Tornado Cash and other mixing services. So these are L2s that essentially exist on the L1. And it's because they exist as L2s on a non-private L1 that these discussions can occur in the first place. I'm not a fan of. I get as Ruben quite rightly mentioned, Vitalik is the most well-intentioned of people, but I won't lie, I find him incredibly naive at times. I find him a very naive person in his outlook, especially his weird obsession with aging. But that's a slightly off topic. But that's my point, is you can be well-intentioned, but you can be naive. And because you can be well-intentioned, you can propose ideas which have good intentions, but may have incredibly dark consequences. And I think this is an example of, yeah. And I think this is an example of something we're discussing here. There are so many layers to this discussion, but going back to even like the grounds for the indictment, and then my other question is it beyond, is the proof beyond reasonable doubt here? Is that the standard set in the US court? Because I think that's going to be a really tricky, if that is the case, this is going to be a really tricky one to go through court. And then it leads me to my next questions, which would be like, how long is the court process going to be? And then if it's going to be a long protracted court process or short one, whatever, what is the purpose of going through this process? I think these are some of the questions that kind of spin out listening to this.
Well, as the American in the conversation, there absolutely should be, beyond a reasonable doubt in the trial. But one of the complaints is OFAC comes in and sanctions Tornado Cash. Now, everybody, who is affiliated with it has their Ethereum stuck, and those people didn't get due process, right? That's one of the complaints by Coin Center is that's not constitutional. You have a right to due process in a trial with the requirement of beyond reasonable doubt.
I think one of the things that this privacy pool thing introduces, which I think actually Zuko brought up during his podcast. By the way, I'm not a big fan of Zuko, but he does bring up good points sometimes.
Yes.
Which is that this idea of having a proof that you're not one of these things is kind of like a proof of innocence, right? And we know basic law or what the law should be, is that people should be presumed to be innocent. I should not have to demonstrate proof of innocence, right? To participate in this.
Absolutely.
There's no additional step. I am presumed to be innocent unless something happens, right? So I think there's a bigger philosophical question here of whether we should even have these things. And for sure, I maybe because I'm a lawyer by training and stuff like that, I guess I'm kind of pragmatic with things. Obviously, I totally support privacy. I've seen how a well-intentioned thing can creep into something else, and how even good intentions can be twisted into something really bad. I don't know if you saw recently, although it's not directly related, but there's been these ads going out showing a sad little child and saying that, CSAM, exploitation with the children, Apple iClouds because of end-to-end encryption enables this, right? And obviously the people that are funding this are people who run ads. They want to get your information. They don't like end-to-end encryption and all of this. And they will always play on these type of things to scare people. And actually, this is the problem with privacy coins and privacy tools at the moment, like we always talk, even when I went to token 2049, and when I told people I was, doing a privacy coin, they're like, oh, you're helping money laundering. That really pisses me off,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
And
They don't do it.
yeah, and it's a public image that we really have to try to shake off. And unfortunately, the leader in this area, Monero, I mean, in terms of market cap and adoption and usage, they are the undeniable leader by a huge margin, even over something like Zcash, is that they are not all of them, but there are significant proportions of their community that say like, yeah, we're on the dark net, we're used by criminals, that means we're legit, like I get it. I understand, say if your two words criminals would use it, which is true, but don't go around and say that, because that just gives fuel to the people who want to discredit privacy tools to just say, you see, all these people are using privacy coins, they're all fucking pedophiles, I mean, like, we should not be giving them ammunition to do that, right? And in a way, this privacy pool stuff, in a way, is also kind of saying like, privacy stuff is bad. That's why we got to protect ourselves
Right.
and all of that, which it's very unfortunate, I mean, all of us have suffered, right now we're seeing like a swath of delistings, as a privacy coin. And it's very frustrating because, like, we even have coin holders that are saying, oh, hey, why don't you pivot away from privacy? And I'm like, well, if you want us to pivot away from privacy, why do you buy us in the first place? Like, that's what we are all about, right?
Right.
But I mean, that's a separate question, but I'm just venting here at this point.
Oh, right. Well, we should buy some ads and point out that encryption protects children, right? It protects their information. It protects what they do from people who would hurt them. And it's like, I feel like truth is on our side. We just need to get the word out. One thing working in our favor is go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say I agree with you fully. I think people's understanding of why privacy is actually important is poor. And I don't think it's really publicized well, like the practical day-to-day examples. I had a colleague of mine, I think a year and a bit ago, found out that she'd been ripped off for about 15. She'd basically been ripped off for her life savings because her personal information was floating about in the sphere, and she basically got sort of a phishing Sybil attack on her bank account. A lot of the fraud is very sophisticated in this space, and it all relies on you giving up your personal information.
And KYC data gets hacked all the time. It's like literally like almost an evil thing to some of it, having to give up your private information.
It's like there's a parallel I actually wanted to draw between Tornado Cash and the discussion we're having, and something that's a bit more recent, which is just all these calls for regulation within AI. I feel like there's a parallel to all these calls for regulation of privacy and financial
it's some of the same people.
Transparency. Yeah. And I see a really clear parallel between what's going on. What I see with Tornado Cash is two things. I see hypocrisy on a state, international government level in terms of the execution. I see a degree of hypocrisy in terms of how the state arrests people without even any charge and holds them and detains them. I see a fundamental degree of hypocrisy in that, although I appreciate there's gray areas in relation to Tornado Cash listening through, I see a degree of hypocrisy in the idea that you can arrest developers for creating a technology and then hold them account as to how that technology is used by other people. And I do appreciate the arguments here, which may potentially link those creators to the direct actions of bad actors a bit more directly. But that's beside the point. It's the idea that we can arrest people for building technology. And I'm kind of the view that you can't stop the advance of technology. And if you try to regulate it, someone else is ultimately just going to go ahead and develop that technology anyway. So I think we enter really murky waters whenever we talk about regulation in technology. and certainly enforcement relating to the development or deployment of technology. It's always a gray area. So I'm going to step back.
Right. You can't stop an idea whose time has come. Well, one thing I want to do, and we need to keep an eye on the time, and it'd be nice to let many of our listeners speak too in the last 10 minutes. I wanted to shift a little bit to discuss what are the things. What do we do? Okay, so clearly there's this problem. What do we do about it as smaller cryptocurrencies? How do we avoid problems? And I'd like to maybe put out a couple things there. I think one thing we aim for true decentralization. I think that's in fact a good thing. We arguably coming from this is it puts pressure to really decentralize because it's the center that gets attacked. What other things can we do? What steps can we take to protect ourselves from this?
I mean, I think one of the small things that we can do, obviously, we all relatively small projects, and our reach is, I would say, it's not horrible, but it's also not going to be like, policy changing sort of stuff, right? And even we
Okay,
all
fair
banded
enough.
together,
Yeah.
we'll be only kind of like preaching to, like, I would say, a small minority of the crowd, right? Which is why I think we also should be joining efforts because, I mean, even if we see Monero as the big boy and all of this, in the grand scale of things, they're still kind of small, right? I mean, like,
Right. No,
they're
it's
really
true.
big.
Few
Yeah,
billion
but
market cap. Yeah.
right. But we as an entire space are small enough that if the exchanges say, look, Europe is banning us, like this is what Europe is happening right now, right? Europe is saying, oh yeah, no privacy, no inbuilt anonymization features, which I don't know why PIVX and Zcash are excluded, by the way. No offense to you guys, but I'm just like, why is Firo in that ban list, but then you guys are not? And one of the things that I did realize was actually a lot of this exchanges, they don't really have a good understanding of the tech because like PIVX, Firo also still has a transparent layer, which, all the exchanges currently uses, right? And I was like telling them, well, if you're okay with Zcash, if you're okay with PIVX, what's your concern with a Lelantis transaction, which is very similar to a Zcash unshielding transaction, right? And unfortunately, we did not manage to convince them that they were the same, even though they are really exactly the same, right? But after I would say like quite a lot of talks, they seem to be slowly realizing that, oh yeah, actually it's kind of the same, but they already put that announcement out, right? So I do feel that we have to be much more. I wish I was a bit more proactive in like trying to talk to them, but I also feel that they was under so much pressure and that privacy coins as a generous space for them are not that big to like give us like super amounts of attention, right? Like obviously if it was Bitcoin, if it was Ethereum, obviously they had all hands in deck, senior management and all of that, right? Oh, a couple of small
Right.
privacy coins and Monero, okay, maybe Monero, but yeah, I'll put my like number two guy or like two layers down to go and deal with it, right? I mean,
Right.
let's be real, right? So I do think that some of the stuff like Monero has a policy group, Zcash also has like some sort of alliance stuff, but unfortunately
Right.
I feel that Zcash I really like Zcash tech, but the way they run it is like they only running it for themselves. There's no real cooperation between other stuff. Like for example, during like Tornado Cash, when the whole Tornado Cash people being arrested and all of that, instead of like championing and say like, hey, we're against this bullshit and whatnot, they were like, oh, don't worry, we are compliant. We are all on all these compliant regulated exchanges. I'm like, wow, that's such a bad
That's
look.
wrong
Like
vibe. Totally wrong vibe.
yeah, wrong look. That's why for a project that says they care about privacy and privacy is normal, it seems that the only privacy that is, oh, by the way, they also got really pissed off when other projects started using privacy is normal, and they're like, you stole it from us. I'm like, oh, come on. But
Well,
anyway, enough
yeah,
Zcash
no, that
bashing. But
if privacy is normal is your theme, you should want more people to say it, right? That's your if that's
yeah,
your real
yeah, yeah.
message.
But I do feel that it would be nice if we can align ourselves with like larger privacy projects. And sure, we may not agree on everything, but there are things that we totally agree on, right? And
Right.
we all have collectively we may not have a lot of power, but it's a lot stronger than if we are all isolated little projects just talking to the exchanges ourselves, right?
100%.
And yeah, and hopefully, these privacy coins, this like especially those larger market cap would include us in these discussions as well. Of course, as long as we behave, and right, there are some
Right.
privacy coins over there. Fuck you, regulators, and like yeah, okay, yeah, I'll ask them to leave the room. But I mean, like the ones that are staying and can have a staying conversation, right? So I do think that there is a huge degree of education that needs to be done. But at the same time, it feels very tiring because companies like Chainalysis, Elliptic, and all of this, they are they have all these people talking to the regulators, they have all these people talking to the exchanges, and that is an access that we as a community do not really have.
That's a very
Right?
good point. That's a very good point. They have their ear, don't they? They're working with
Correct.
them day by day, talking, planting their ideas. We need to be getting our
And
ideas across just as much. That's a great point.
a very interesting thing that I found out, which is quite weird, was that I actually asked Binance. I was like, "Hey, what circumstances would you could reconsider this?" And they're like saying, "Well, if you work together with a chain analytics, like Chainalysis or Elliptic, we'll be okay with that." I'm like, "Wow,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, that's
right?"
terrible.
And that's terrible, right? I was like, wow, even if I wanted to do that, the optics are horrible because in the way I'm like saying, to me, practically, it doesn't really make a difference whether we work or not because whatever data you want is already on chain. Whether we partner or not doesn't really make a difference, especially if you have a transparent layer. You want to trace the transparent layer, makes you tick a few boxes, sure, go ahead, right? But but at the same time, it's like we can't be like, well, what's the benefit of paying this as a privacy company to pay these people, right? To to say,
No,
oh
no,
yeah, you're compliant. That sounds so wrong, right?
it's a
But
very bad idea because like your mission is privacy and their mission is to expose. So it's just the wrong thing to do to partner
I,
with them.
I, pragmatically, I don't see anything wrong with chain analytics company because they are using data that is already
Right,
public, right? That means,
right. I
yeah,
agree
yeah,
with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Right, they're free to do their thing, but
Correct,
it's not natural for you to partner with them. What that suggests,
correct.
what that is going to suggest to everybody is you're putting something in your code to help them, and that's where you don't even want to. Not only do you not want to do that, you want to avoid the appearance of doing that.
But
So
you know who I found out is partner with Chainalysis and Elliptic?
I'm going to speculate and say Zcash.
No, it's
No,
mobile coin. Well, I think maybe Zcash has something working with Chain. I know Chainalysis definitely
I
supports
hope
Zcash,
Zcash isn't. But which
but
coin?
mobile coin, which is also one of the lists of there were four coins that were excluded from Europe: Firo, Monero, mobile coin, and Zen. Zen, which actually is removing their
Oh,
privacy,
really?
so that's really really unfortunate, right?
Really, Zen
And
is
mobile,
removing their privacy. That's
yeah,
terrible. Just terrible.
yes, terrible. And Session, so even Loki, well, they're now called Oxen. And I really love the Oxen project and the Session, which is their decentralized messenger. It's a great alternative. The Signal doesn't require phone numbers, actually does like proper end-to-end encryption, not like freaking Telegram. And they also have decided to move from their Monero type of base type of thing to a layer to basically a token on a layer two, right? And you see all these coins and even like fucking Verge. Sorry, if you have any Verge fans here, people still think, oh, privacy coin, Verge, and Verge was like
Right.
proudly promoting, we are,
Verge is only
yeah.
nominally a privacy coin.
It's not even a privacy coin. They
Yeah,
just
it's
use
not.
Tor. That's about it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they're like, well, we are totally, traceable. And I'm like, okay, so
Don't they
I
just
feel
hide IP addresses? Isn't that Verge's
they,
thing?
they don't even really do that,
Oh,
but that's a
really?
topic for a different question.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess my point is that, like, yeah, what's my point? I just lost my train of thought. But what I but what I'm saying is that there is a lot of pressure from exchanges to comply, and we also have to understand that and not be too combative, because we understand their situation, right? But we band together to at least like manage to have
Right.
a big enough group that we can sit down with them and educate to them the differences. And
That makes
this is
sense.
past beyond, oh, your protocol is like this and like this, like this, like this. Even if I hate Zcash, if I have to work together with them on this, I will work together with them on this. It's for the good of the industry, and we are all for the same goal. And I hope these large coins realize that even though we may be individually small, we are stronger as an entire sector, rather than, because I think if people delete
Right.
Zcash and a couple others, they're not going to lose that much revenue. Let's face it, right? Yeah.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
that's a great point. Working together as an industry is an important way forward. So Dr. Cap, we proposed like focus on decentralization, get the message across as an industry. What would you add to that before we go to questions as steps we should take as small private cryptocurrencies to avoid tornado cash problems?
Sure. I think we need to understand, firstly, I think we need to understand the philosophy. So basically, what I was basically going to say is, public systems, publicly traceable systems, generally steer towards centralization and control, whereas privacy-focused systems steer further towards decentralization and freedom. That's kind of my fundamental philosophy. Now, I think one thing we need to understand is, that understanding didn't occur overnight. That required a huge knowledge differential. It required an understanding of history, politics, psychology, encryption, the ability to understand encryption on some degree of abstract level, understanding of computing, understanding of various different methodologies. And I think the pioneers and the leaders in the privacy space tend to be amongst this is not me patting myself on the back. This is me making a complementary observation, which is that the leaders in privacy focused technologies, the cutting edge people within those, they tend to be, so I think they're some of the smartest people on the planet. And there's a huge knowledge differential between what they know and what the message they're trying to communicate versus the information base of people who don't understand that stuff. And I think that's reflected certainly in what Ruben said in relation to, some of these centralized exchanges not really understanding these privacy technologies or even the technologies that they are, facilitating the trading of. So I think that needs to be established as there's a knowledge differential, that it is exhausting communicating that. But as Ruben rightly pointed out, I think networking is a big thing. One of the things I really like doing is, talking to you, Yanachar, and Ruben. And I think that's part of the us getting together. But I also like us getting, I remember we had Zano, we had their sort of lead there, Ravana, on last time. But I think it's things like networking. I think our project recently joined the Privacy Finance Syndicate, which incorporates Navcoin and a few other projects. Certainly invite you guys to sort of explore and perhaps come on board with that too. And I think it's
That
reaching
sounds
out not
great.
just within. Yeah. I think it would be great for you guys to sort of look into it and maybe join it. I think that sort of helps form an overarching brand and an overarching lobby and body for us to kind of collectively represent. I think the other thing is kind of to look at our local organizations, certainly UK wise. I'm a member of Liberty, and I think a lot of the work they do to support privacy in the UK and advocate for privacy in the UK is excellent. And I think it's forging links with your local communities and your local organizations, your national organizations that help essentially create and deepen that network. One of the things I always strikes me as funny is you mentioned Signal earlier. I'm sure Meredith Whittaker, who's the head of Signal, a part of me, I'm sure she secretly knows about all this stuff that, guys like you and me and some of the others are doing. But at the same time, it would be nice to know if she is or if she isn't, and perhaps kind of, I know they're more part of the mainstream face of privacy, but being able to kind of reach out and forge links with people like that who already have significant public presence and resource and reputation behind them. So I think there's aspects to that we collectively need to work towards. We do need to realize, and as you pointed out, that there are definitely financial interests at play in regards to chain analysis, working with governments and companies to exploit publicly available data and extract value and profit from that. That is their end game, and that is their goal, and that's where their priorities lie. But at the same time, we need to understand the financial incentives for people who focus on privacy. So perhaps reaching out to enterprising into, to industrialists, entrepreneurs, researchers, people from these communities, people who manage and run very complex supply chains and logistics, who absolutely require privacy to safeguard their manufacturing processes, their shipping processes, their R&D work. We need to highlight these technologies to them, because that shows pragmatic, real world value to people who absolutely need it, and thus will be willing to potentially throw resource behind it. So I think that's my kind of take from all of this. So I think pragmatic, forward-looking. I'm happy to sort of leave it to you guys from that.
And education, I think that's a really good point. So we have, a focus on decentralization. We have getting the word out and getting our accurate, in my opinion, perspective out there to counter other narratives, and also education. And I think that's a great point, Dr. Cap. I mean, we can see it even in the indictment against the two Romans. They didn't have the technology right. If they'd had somebody they could talk to, like you mentioned, the prominent individuals, maybe they wouldn't have charged them with being a money transmitter. Right. So there's an educational aspect to it. So I think those are three great things to come out of this. Now, we are targeting roughly an hour, and let's see if there's some.
I have one quick comment.
Yes, please.
The word privacy syndicate is a horrible name optically. Like, we're trying to say we're not illegal, but then we're calling ourselves privacy syndicate. It sounds really.
Did you play Syndicate Wars in the early 2000s? Did you play the video game Syndicate Wars? That was amazing.
There's no positive association with the word syndicates. Crime syndicate. Okay, open it for the
only
questions.
thing it's better than is cartel.
Fine. Okay, we can look into that. We can look into rebranding. Yeah, it's all early days.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Sounds good. Well, let's see if any of our esteemed listeners would like to comment or ask questions. I think there may be a way to. Let's see, and my co-hosts help me see if there's anybody here who would like to speak before we end it. Anyone listening in? Thoughts, questions? We're eager to get your input.
Why privacy coin price go down?
Right. Well, I think we can end on that, because I actually, you have to, if you look at the cryptocurrency space, it came up earlier, Monero, who's the big boy, is still much smaller than these others. Why is that? I think that it's because people are a little worried about all this stuff. They're worried about the unjust tornado cash enforcements and indictments. And I think that when we move beyond this through steps like the ones we've talked about, ensuring decentralization, getting our message out, and education, that will change, because we know that you need to have like obscurity in the blockchain, right? I mean, complete transparency, clear as glass, really just doesn't work. It's not what people want. It's not the way our ancestors lived. It's not the way we lived 50 years ago. It's not the way we want to live. And so I think that that's, there's a good case to be made, at least, that that's going to change as we take these steps and get this straightened out. So we can end, we're right at the hour. Any final thoughts, Ruben, Dr. Cap, before we
No,
close?
none from me.
Well,
Okay,
it's been a
Dr.
really
Cap?
nice discussion.
It has.
I've enjoyed this. Yeah.
It has. Okay, very good. Well, we'll end it there then. Thank you all to all the listeners for joining us. Very nice having you. And Ruben, Dr. Cap, thank you very much for your insights.
And we have the recording this time, so great.
Yeah, it's recorded.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Goodbye. Oh.
Good afternoon, guys. Oh, bye.